Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Dalton from the Petrolist, obviously, because you're watching my channel. Who else could it be? Today's video is actually, oh, my neck. Oh. Today's video is actually going to be a Formula One video, but I had some stuff that I wanted to get done in the garage, so I decided to film from here because sometimes working in the studio can be restrictive, and I can't get quite as much done in a day as I want to. Now, there are some very key things going on with F1. I got some notes over here. You know what? Full transparency. I have a noteboard because it would be impossible for me to remember everything I wanted to talk about just off the cuff. But one of the big things is Checo Perez is out at Red Bull. That is a huge development. It's kind of one of those things that everybody saw coming, but nobody really thought would ever happen. Well, it's happened, and it's kind of complicated. I think it's more complicated on Red Bull's end and on Checo's career end than it is for the rest of us. I think most of us kind of saw that Perez was struggling with the RB20, especially after they had to de-engineer it. So they had to remove the T-valve. The engineers and the drivers struggled with the struggled with the car for a while. But as you saw, Max Verstappen, being the kind of driver that he is, he's definitely one of the elite drivers ever in Formula One. He was able to drive that car, still be a top performer, still win a couple of races, and ultimately still win the Drivers' Championship versus Checo Perez. And he's still a decent mid-tier driver, but he simply could not cope with what the RB20 had turned into after they had to remove the T-valve. And, you know, let's kind of get one thing straight. In Formula One, there's always going to be, I don't want to say cheating, but there's always going to be, you know, the pushings of the boundaries. McLaren had the flappy semi-DRS thing that they had to, I can't remember if they had to resolve it mid-season or if they're going to resolve it next season. There's the T-valve way back in 1978. I think it was Mario Andretti. His John Player special team put some skirts on the car, which is effectively, you know, probably like the first ground effects, similar to what they're doing right now, using the bottom of the car to create downforce. But back in 1978, it was unheard of and eventually deemed illegal. Now, I can go into more examples of that, but that is to say that yes, teams do kind of push the boundaries to greater or lesser extents. The T-valve was a little bit egregious, but overall, it's not something that's unheard of in the sport. Anyway, back to Checo Perez. He just wasn't able to cope with what the car had become after they removed the T-valve. And everybody kind of saw it playing out throughout the season. But Red Bull has been known to make very hasty decisions with drivers, but for some reason or another, they could never really get themselves to make a very quick decision with Checo Perez, even though they could see his performance waning. Now, you could say it was the power of Perez's contract, and from what I understand, Perez will be paid out at least a little something because he did have a contract through the end of 2026. And when I say little something, I actually mean quite a hefty lot of something. Man, this thing is stuck, which is crazy because okay, there it is. Rumors say that maybe it's going to be like $30 million. I mean, imagine being paid $30 million to not drive. Now, if you look at it from a financial standpoint, it's just like, hey, $30 million to not drive? I would let somebody pay me $30 million to not drive a race car. From an ego standpoint, if you've been a Formula One driver for a very long time, you're going to be possibly really eager to get back in the sport. So what does that mean for him? He's still, I would say, a decent mid-tier driver. And I don't think he has any intention of, fully staying away from the sport like maybe, Daniel Ricciardo. But with Cadillac joining the grid in 2026 and Checo Perez being Mexican, which is a North American country, Cadillac F1 would do really well to have essentially, an American driver, North American driver. The Formula One market in Mexico, especially because of Checo Perez, it's quite lucrative. I was in Mexico, and you see giant billboards of the guy, and deservedly he is, I think, kind of a national hero. Is he the best suited for Red Bull? Clearly not. But is he still a deserving Formula One driver? I would say yeah. It's really hard to get those super licenses, and he has one. And maybe if he can get back into a car that suits him better, then he'll have a better performances. Now, if you look at, I think it was Pierre Gasly, he was at Red Bull, struggled with the car. Daniel Ricciardo struggled with the car. Other drivers struggled with the car, because when you're prioritizing Max Verstappen, he has a very particular driving style, and he loves the car to be, on its razor edge. There's only so much you can do as an engineer to soften that for a driver that has a different style. Now, let's see, what do I have in the notes? I think that's all that I have on the Checo notes, but that leads us to Liam Lawson. And, like I said, we had Daniel Ricciardo come through, we had Pierre Gasly, I can't remember the other driver, maybe it was Alex Albon, and all of them have turned into good drivers after they left Red Bull and they had the opportunity to drive different cars. But now we're getting into Liam Lawson, who's leaving V-Carb to go into Red Bull. Now, he doesn't have really enough of a career to allow me to make any true judgments or observations on how I think he's going to perform at Red Bull. But I just have to trust that Red Bull maybe saw his data, maybe saw his driving style, and figured that he was going to be the best complementary driver to Red Bull, or to the car that's set up for Max Verstappen. It's increasingly important for Red Bull to have a good second driver, because in 2025 there is the possibility that Verstappen in the RB21, whatever it's going to be, that he's not necessarily going to be able to, I don't want to say coast to a victory, but it's going to be a lot harder. So if they want a driver's championship, it's not necessarily guaranteed. And if they want a constructor's championship or even a high placement in the constructor's championship, that's also not guaranteed. So it's super critical in 2025 that Red Bull get a good second driver. And as far as Red Bull are concerned, that good second driver is Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson has, where are my notes? So Liam Lawson is 22 years old. He's got 0 wins and 6 points, but remember, that's over the span of only 11 starts. And that's about as much as I can say about Liam Lawson. He's got a lot of career ahead of him, and we'll be able to talk about his performance a little bit later. Well, not later in this video. later in his actual career. Now, if we look at Yuki Tsunoda, who was overlooked by Red Bull, he's 24 years old, so he's still got a lot of future. He's had 87 starts with 91 career points, 0 wins. So if you ask me, Yuki Tsunoda was definitely a decent candidate. So either it was something in the data from Yuki's driving, or maybe Red Bull just remembers how difficult he was to work with early in his career, because remember, he was very feisty. And, you know, some rumors say that he was blacklisted from ever really driving for Red Bull. And it does make you wonder what's going to happen to his career once Honda is no longer Red Bull's power unit supplier, because Honda does like to have a Japanese driver. If that's no longer the case, that could spell trouble for Yuki's career. Oh, where did I put that bracket? It would be really good to have that bracket. Anyway, I'll find that later. Let's keep going. So Yuki Tsunoda is going to be stuck in V-carb hell till Honda leaves, and we don't really know what's going to happen after that. You know what? Honestly, there's not much more to that story. It is what it is. Let's kind of move on to Bottas. Bottas is going to be Mercedes reserve driver in 2025. Now, Bottas is very, very decorated. 10 wins, 67 podiums, 20 poles, 19 fastest laps, 247 career starts, and he's 35 years old. In this day and age, 35 years old means he still has a lot of racing fuel in the gas tank, if you catch my drift. And his first start was in 2013. Now, should he go over and be Tsunoda's teammate? I don't know if he can, because at least he would be an actual race day driver and not a reserve driver. Bottas did say something about regretting going to stake Sauber, and I need to do some research on that to find out exactly what he was saying. But he's kind of stuck. You know, maybe he can catch a ride with Cadillac. Maybe it'll be him and Checo Perez. But let's not forget, there are tons of other drivers. And, you know, do you want Checo Perez with his connections, his endorsements, his North American connection especially, and then a younger driver, you know, some kind of protege that you can put into your Cadillac F1 program, and eventually have that person take over as the lead driver, like a young phenom, something along the lines of a Kimi Antonelli? Or do you want two experienced drivers to really help you build your program? Because Checo and Bottas, they could definitely do that. And they'll be coming from two very different perspectives, and they will have inside knowledge from two of the top teams while they were at the top of their form, Mercedes and Red Bull. They were there during championships. That's a lot of knowledge. And Daniel Ricciardo, he doesn't have any interest in driving for Cadillac, and I get that. Maybe he's just done with Formula One. I was talking to my wife, and Formula One, I personally think, is kind of like being in the military. It is absolutely, it's an entire lifestyle. It really, truly is an entire lifestyle, and one that, oh man, you know what? I gotta hit pause on this video because I need to find some parts, and I don't want to be walking back and forth off the camera, so I will be back in just a second.